Story 1. At exactly 2:17 a.m., the phone at the front desk rang. It rang once, then again, and again. Night clerk Ethan Cole stared at it from behind the empty reception counter of the Grand Harbor Hotel. The lobby was silent. Too silent. The kind of silence that only existed in hotels after midnight, when the elevators stopped moving and the hallways became long, empty tunnels of carpet and dim lights. Ethan had been working the night shift for 6 months. He had answered hundreds of late-night calls. Drunk guests asking for towels, tourists asking about breakfast, couples arguing over reservations. But something about this call felt different. The phone kept ringing. Slow, patient, like whoever was on the other end knew Ethan would eventually pick up. He swallowed and lifted the receiver. Front desk, this is Ethan speaking. For a moment there was nothing. Just static. Then a voice. Quiet. Trembling. Please, help me. Ethan sat up straight. Sir, what seems to be the problem? The voice sounded like a man in his 40s. Panicked. Out of breath. I think someone is in my room. Ethan glanced at the computer screen. Which room are you calling from? A pause. Then the man answered. 7007. Room 707. Ethan frowned. He quickly checked the reservation system. Room 707 was listed as vacant. No guest. No check-in. Nothing. Sir, Ethan said carefully. Are you sure you're in room 707? Yes, the man whispered urgently. I checked the door number twice. Ethan looked again at the system. Still empty. No one had been assigned that room for 3 days. Sir, Ethan said slowly, I don't have anyone registered in that room. The man's breathing grew heavier. That's impossible. Because I'm standing inside it. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. Can you describe what's happening? The man whispered again. There's someone outside my door. Ethan looked toward the elevator hall. The security cameras showed nothing. Empty corridors. Still elevators. Are they knocking? Ethan asked. No. The man's voice shook. They're just standing there. Ethan pulled up the hallway camera for the 7th floor. The screen flickered, then showed the carpeted corridor. Completely empty. No one near room 707. Sir, Ethan said gently, I'm looking at the camera right now. There's nobody outside your door. The man's breathing stopped. Then he whispered something that made Ethan's blood turn cold. That's because they're inside the hallway walls. Ethan leaned forward. What? The man spoke again. They keep scratching. As if on cue, Ethan heard something faint through the phone. A sound. A slow, dragging scrape. Like fingernails sliding across wood. Ethan stood up from his chair. Sir, stay in your room. I'm coming upstairs. No, the man said quickly. Don't come here. Why not? Because if you open the door. The man's voice dropped to a whisper. They'll know there's more of us. The phone line crackled, then went silent. The call disconnected. Ethan stared at the receiver. His heart was pounding. For several seconds he just stood there, trying to convince himself the call had been a prank. But something bothered him. He slowly opened the reservation system again. Room 707. Still vacant. Then Ethan noticed something strange. There was a note attached to the room. A warning tag from hotel management. He clicked it. The message appeared. Room permanently closed. Do not assign. Ethan blinked. Closed. He had worked here 6 months. No one had ever mentioned a closed room. He opened the building map. Room 707 appeared on the layout. But something looked wrong. The numbering went. 701. 702. 703. 704. 705. 706. Then, room 707 wasn't on the map. Ethan stared at the screen, confused. How can someone call from a room that doesn't exist? Behind him, the elevator bell dinged. Ethan slowly turned. The doors slid open. A man stepped out, mid-40s, pale, shaking, wearing hotel slippers and a wrinkled bathrobe. His eyes were wide with fear. The man stumbled toward the desk. Ethan recognized his voice immediately. It was the man from the phone. The guest grabbed the counter. You have to help me. Ethan swallowed. "Sir, what room are you staying in?" The man answered instantly. 707. Ethan felt the room spin slightly. "That room doesn't exist." The man slowly turned toward the elevator behind him. His voice dropped to a whisper. "Yes, it does." Then he said something that made Ethan's stomach drop. "Because the elevator took me there." At that exact moment, the elevator doors behind the man opened again. Slowly, quietly, and inside the elevator, the button labeled 707 was glowing. The elevator doors remained open. Inside the panel of buttons, the numbers ran from 1 to 14. But between 7 and 8, a strange light flickered. A number Ethan had never seen before. 707. Not written like the others. Not engraved. It looked added, like a glowing mistake in the elevator's system. The man in the bathrobe stared at it with shaking hands. "That's the button," he whispered. "That's how I got there." Ethan felt the air in the lobby grow colder. "You pressed it." The man nodded slowly. "I didn't mean to." Marcus Hill, according to the check-in records, had arrived earlier that night around 11:40 p.m. Business traveler. One night stay. Room 712. Everything about his reservation was normal. Except now he was claiming he had been in room 707. A room the building map said didn't exist. Marcus leaned across the desk. "Please tell me you're not sending me back up there." Ethan looked at the elevator again. The 707 button was still glowing. Waiting. Almost like it expected someone to press it again. "I'm not sending you anywhere," Ethan said carefully. "But I need to understand what happened." Marcus nodded nervously. "Okay." He rubbed his temples. "I went up to my room earlier. Room 712. Everything was normal. I unpacked. Watched some TV. Then around 2 in the morning I heard something strange." Ethan asked quietly, "What kind of strange?" Marcus hesitated. "Footsteps. Slow footsteps. In the hallway." That wasn't unusual. Hotels had guests moving around at night all the time. But Marcus continued. "And then I heard someone whispering." Ethan frowned. "Whispering what?" Marcus shook his head. "I couldn't understand the words. But it sounded like more than one voice." Marcus swallowed. "So I decided to go downstairs for coffee." Ethan nodded. "Okay." Marcus pointed toward the elevator. "I got in. The doors closed. And I pressed the lobby button." He looked at Ethan. But the elevator didn't go down. It went up. Ethan glanced at the floor indicator above the elevator doors. The digital display simply read 7. Marcus continued slowly. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. And I thought maybe I'd pressed the wrong floor. So I stepped out. His voice lowered. And that's when I saw the hallway. Ethan leaned forward slightly. "What was wrong with it?" Marcus's hands trembled. "Nothing. That's what scared me." The hallway looked exactly like every other floor in the hotel. Same patterned carpet. Same wall lights. Same numbered doors. But something felt off. "It was too quiet," Marcus said. "No air conditioning sound. No elevator hum. Nothing." He walked down the corridor, looking for the elevator number sign, trying to figure out what floor he had landed on. That's when he noticed the door numbers. Then, 707. Marcus looked at Ethan. The door was slightly open. "Just a crack?" Ethan asked quietly. "So you went inside?" Marcus nodded. "I thought maybe it was my room." The lighting was dim, but the furniture looked the same as every other room in the hotel. Bed, desk, TV, bathroom door. Marcus rubbed his arms as if remembering the cold. But something felt wrong. Ethan asked, "What do you mean?" Marcus leaned closer. The room felt used. Used? Ethan repeated. Marcus nodded, like someone had lived there for a long time. There were scratches on the desk, marks on the walls, and the carpet near the bed looked worn. That was strange. All hotel rooms were cleaned daily, and refurbished every few years. They never looked lived in. Marcus continued. "I was about to leave when I heard something." Ethan felt his chest tighten. "What?" Marcus whispered. "Scratching." The sound came from inside the wall, right beside the bed. Slow. Dragging. Like fingernails moving through wood. Marcus stood frozen. Listening. The scratching stopped. Then he heard something worse. A whisper. From inside the wall. Ethan's stomach tightened. What did it say? Marcus looked directly into his eyes. It said, "You're new." The lobby suddenly felt much colder. Ethan forced himself to stay calm. "So you ran?" Marcus shook his head slowly. "I tried. But the door wouldn't open." The handle turned. But the door wouldn't move. Like something heavy was pressing against the other side. Marcus whispered. And then the scratching started again. Only this time. It was behind the walls on every side of the room. Ethan felt his pulse racing. What happened next? Marcus pointed to the elevator behind him. "I called the front desk. And while I was talking to you..." The scratching stopped. Marcus swallowed. And then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Ethan remembered the call clearly. The man had said someone was outside his door. Marcus continued. They stopped right outside the room. Then his voice dropped. And something whispered through the door. Ethan asked quietly, "What did it say?" Marcus's eyes widened. It said, "Another one." At that moment, the elevator dinged again. Both men turned. The doors slowly opened. The panel inside was dark now. Except for one button. 707. Still glowing. Marcus backed away instantly. No. No way. Ethan stared at the elevator. Something about it felt wrong now. Like the space inside it was deeper than it should be. Like the elevator car was waiting. Then something strange happened. The elevator panel flickered. The numbers changed. Instead of normal floors, the display briefly showed 6, 7, 7.5, 8. Then it returned to normal. Ethan blinked. "Did you see that?" Marcus nodded slowly. The floor between floors. Ethan walked toward the elevator. Marcus grabbed his arm. "Don't." Ethan turned. "I work here. If something's wrong with the building, I have to check it." Marcus shook his head desperately. "That place isn't part of the building." Ethan looked back at the elevator. The glowing 707 button pulsed softly. "What if someone else ends up there?" Ethan said. Marcus didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. The elevator suddenly moved. Without anyone touching it, the doors closed slowly, and the floor indicator began changing. Then, the number flickered, and stopped at something impossible. 707. Inside the elevator shaft, something scratched loudly against the metal walls. Marcus whispered, "Oh God!" Then the elevator began descending. Slowly, quietly, until the display returned to lobby. The doors opened again. Empty. But this time, inside the elevator panel, the glowing 707 button was gone. Ethan stepped closer, studying the panel carefully. The buttons now went from 7 directly to 8. Like they always had. Marcus whispered. "It moved." Ethan turned. "What do you mean?" Marcus looked toward the ceiling. "The floor." He said quietly. "That place isn't fixed. It moves between floors." At that moment, the phone behind the front desk rang again. Ethan slowly walked back to the counter. The display showed an internal call. Room number 707. Ethan answered the phone carefully. "Front desk." For several seconds there was silence. Then a voice spoke. Not Marcus. Not a man. A whisper. Dry. Slow. Unnatural. "Another one has arrived." The line went dead. Marcus backed away from the desk. What did it say? Ethan stared at the receiver. His voice barely worked. It said someone else is in room 707. Marcus looked around the empty lobby. Terrified. Who? Before Ethan could answer, the elevator dinged again. The doors opened, and a woman slowly stepped out, barefoot, wearing hotel sheets wrapped around her body, her eyes wide with confusion. She walked toward the desk, and asked the exact same question Marcus had asked earlier. "Can you help me?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Of course." The woman looked over her shoulder at the elevator, then whispered something that made Marcus feel sick. "I think there's someone inside my room." Ethan forced himself to ask the question, "What room are you staying in?" The woman answered, 7007. The woman was shaking. Her feet were bare against the cold marble floor of the lobby. The hotel sheet wrapped around her shoulders looked like it had been torn off a bed in a hurry. Marcus stepped back when he saw her. Another one, he whispered. Ethan stared at the elevator, then back at the woman. He said gently, "What's your name?" The woman blinked, as if waking up from a long dream. "Clara." Her voice was dry. "Clara Bennett." Ethan quickly pulled up the guest database on the computer. He typed the name. Nothing appeared. No reservation. No check-in. No record of anyone named Clara Bennett staying in the hotel tonight. Or this week. Or even this month. Ethan felt the same cold dread he had felt with Marcus. Another guest. Another person claiming to be from room 707. A room that did not exist. Clara looked around the empty lobby. "Where is everyone?" Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" "There were people upstairs," she said slowly. "A lot of them." Marcus froze. "A lot?" Clara nodded. "In the hallway." She hugged herself tightly. They were knocking on the walls. Ethan felt a knot forming in his chest. "You were in room 707. "Yes." "How long?" Clara looked confused. I don't know." Marcus and Ethan exchanged a look. Marcus stepped forward. "When did you check into the hotel?" Clara hesitated. Then she answered quietly. "Yesterday." Ethan typed quickly. Still nothing. No record. No reservation. Then Clara said something that made the room go silent. "I checked in 20 years ago." Marcus laughed nervously. "Okay, that's not funny." But Clara wasn't smiling. Her eyes were wide. Terrified. "I swear. I remember the year. 2006. Ethan slowly turned back to the computer. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then he opened the archived records system. The hotel kept digital records going back decades. He typed, "Bennett, Clara." The system searched. Then a result appeared. "Clara Bennett, check-in date, May 14th, 2006. Room assignment, 707. Ethan felt his heart slam in his chest. Marcus leaned closer to the screen. "That's impossible." Clara stared at the monitor. "That's me." Ethan read the rest of the file. Check-in time, 10:32 p.m. Stay duration, 1 night. Status, guest never checked out. Marcus stepped away from the desk. No way." Clara looked like she might faint. "What does it say?" Ethan didn't know how to answer. But he forced himself. "It says, you never left." The lobby suddenly felt colder. Marcus shook his head. "That can't be right." Clara whispered, "I thought I just got here tonight." Ethan opened more archived records. His hands trembled as he searched for something else. Room 707. The screen filled with results. Not one. Not 10. Dozens. Guest records stretching back 40 years. Every one of them assigned to room 707. Every one marked with the same status. Guest never checked out. Marcus leaned over Ethan's shoulder. "How many?" Ethan scrolled slowly. 32 names. 32 missing guests. All assigned to the same room. The oldest record appeared at the bottom. Guest name, Robert Hale. Check-in date, October 3rd, 1982. Room, 707. Status, never checked out. Clara whispered, "Where are they?" Ethan didn't answer, because deep down, he already suspected the truth. They were still there, inside the room. Marcus paced the lobby. "This is insane. This is some kind of computer error." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No." He pointed at Clara. "She's standing right here." Marcus had no reply. Clara stepped closer to the desk. "Can you show me the list?" Ethan turned the monitor. She scanned the names slowly. Her eyes widened. "I remember some of these people." Marcus froze. "What?" Clara pointed to a name. "David Lang. He was in the room next to mine." Another name. "Maria Torres." She said the walls were moving. Marcus felt his stomach turn. "You met them?" Clara nodded. "They were all stuck there." Ethan felt his pulse racing. "Stuck where?" Clara looked toward the elevator. Her voice trembled. "In the hallway between floors." Marcus whispered, The flaw between flaws. Clara nodded slowly. Every time someone pressed the elevator button, another door appeared. Ethan leaned forward. What kind of door? Clara's face went pale. The kind that leads to room 707. The elevator dinged again. All three of them turned instantly. The doors opened, but no one stepped out. The elevator was empty, except for one thing. A small folded piece of paper on the floor of the elevator car. Ethan walked toward it slowly. Marcus grabbed his arm. Don't go in there. But Ethan stepped inside anyway. The elevator felt colder than the lobby. He bent down and picked up the paper. It was old, yellowed, like it had been there for years. Ethan unfolded it carefully. Inside was a list of names. 32 names. The exact same names from the registry, but something had changed. At the bottom of the list, 2 new names had been written, in fresh ink. Marcus Hill, Clara Bennett. Marcus's face turned white. No way. Clara whispered. What does that mean? Ethan didn't answer, because something else was written beneath the names. A sentence. Room 707 always needs new guests. Suddenly, the elevator doors slammed shut. Marcus shouted, Ethan! But the elevator had already begun moving. The floor indicator changed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Then it flickered. 707. Inside the elevator, the lights went out, and somewhere above them, inside the walls of the hotel, something began scratching again. Darkness swallowed the elevator. For a moment, Ethan heard nothing but his own breathing. Then the elevator shuddered. The floor beneath his feet vibrated like something enormous was moving inside the building's skeleton. Marcus! Ethan shouted. His voice echoed through the metal walls. But Marcus was outside, in the lobby, and Ethan was no longer sure where the elevator had taken him. The lights flickered once. Dim emergency lighting turned the elevator into a dull red box. The floor indicator above the door displayed one number. Not 1, not 7, not 8. Just 3 digits glowing faintly. 707. Ethan pressed the lobby button. Nothing happened. He pressed door open. Still nothing. The elevator didn't respond. Instead, it continued moving. Slowly. Down. Or maybe sideways. He couldn't tell. Then the elevator stopped. The sudden silence felt wrong. Heavy. Like the building itself was holding its breath. A soft ding echoed through the car. And the doors opened. Ethan stepped out slowly. The hallway outside looked exactly like the 7th floor. Same beige carpet. Same dim wall lights. Same rows of hotel doors. But something about the air felt wrong. It smelled stale. Like a room that had been sealed for years. He turned around. The elevator doors behind him closed instantly. Before he could step back inside, the elevator disappeared. The hallway lights flickered softly, and Ethan was alone. He looked down the corridor. The doors stretched in both directions, but there were no numbers. Every door plate was blank. Just empty metal rectangles where room numbers should have been. Ethan whispered to himself, "This can't be real." But the carpet felt real beneath his shoes. The air felt real in his lungs. And somewhere far down the corridor, he heard voices. Soft voices. Whispering. Ethan walked toward the sound. The lights above him buzzed faintly. Every few steps, he noticed something strange. The hallway didn't seem to follow normal architecture. It bent in subtle ways. Corners appeared where they shouldn't. The corridor seemed longer than the building's layout should allow. Finally, he reached a door. The only door with a number. A metal plate screwed above the frame. 3 digits. 707. The door was slightly open. Just a crack. A thin line of yellow light spilled out onto the carpet, and the whispering voices came from inside. Ethan's heart hammered in his chest. He pushed the door open slowly. The room looked like a normal hotel room. Bed, desk, television, bathroom door. But there was something terribly wrong. The room was full of people. Not crowded, not packed, but filled with quiet figures standing around the edges of the room. Men, women, different ages, different clothes. Some looked modern. Others looked like they had stepped out of decades past. All of them turned toward Ethan. At the same time, a man stepped forward, Thin, gray-haired, wearing a suit that looked like it belonged in the 1980s. "Another guest," he said quietly. Ethan stared at him. "Who are you?" The man smiled sadly. "Robert Hale." Ethan felt his blood turn to ice. That name. It was the first entry in the missing guest registry. "You checked in here in 1982, Ethan said. Robert nodded slowly. "And I never checked out." Another woman stepped forward. Ethan recognized her from the registry too. "Maria Torres," she said. 1994. A third person spoke. "David Lang. 2001. Clara had said she recognized these names, because they had all been here. Inside this room. Ethan looked around the group. There were dozens of them. All the missing guests. All the names from the registry. Standing silently in room 707. "Why are you here?" Ethan asked. Robert Hale answered calmly. "Because the hotel keeps us." Ethan frowned. "What does that mean?" Robert gestured toward the walls. "This floor exists between floors. Between time." Ethan didn't understand. Robert continued. "The building needed space. So the architect created one. A hidden level between the 7th and 8th floors." Ethan remembered the flickering elevator number earlier. 7.5. "But something went wrong," Robert said. "The space didn't stay empty." Ethan whispered. "What filled it?" Robert looked directly at him. "The hotel did." Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" Robert's expression darkened. "The building is alive." The room fell silent. None of the other guests laughed. None of them disagreed. They simply watched Ethan, like they had all reached the same terrible conclusion years ago. "The hotel grows," Robert said quietly. "And sometimes it needs more room." Ethan looked at the walls. The wallpaper was scratched. Deep marks carved into the surface. Hundreds of them. Like people had tried to dig through the walls. Ethan whispered, "Those scratching sounds." Robert nodded. "People trying to get out." Ethan turned toward the door. "I'm leaving." Robert shook his head gently. "You can't." Ethan stepped toward the hallway anyway. But the door wouldn't open. The handle turned. But the door stayed shut. Just like Marcus had described. Ethan felt panic rising. There has to be another way out. Robert sighed. "There is." Ethan looked up quickly. "Where?" Robert pointed to the far wall. There used to be a stairwell. Ethan followed his finger. The wall looked solid. Just wallpaper and drywall. But then Ethan noticed something. A thin crack running vertically through the paint. Like a hidden door. "What's behind it?" Ethan asked. Robert answered slowly. "The architect's secret." Ethan pulled at the wall panel. It creaked open, revealing a narrow concrete staircase descending into darkness. Robert spoke softly. He built a control room down there. A place to monitor the hidden floor. Ethan looked at the dark stairwell. "And he disappeared," Ethan guessed. Robert nodded. The first night room 707 opened. From deep below the stairs, Ethan heard something. A slow scraping noise. The same scratching sound. But louder. Closer. The other guests stepped back nervously. Robert whispered, "It's awake." Ethan turned. "What is?" Robert's voice trembled. "The thing that lives in the walls." Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the room. The walls shuddered. The scratching exploded into frantic noise, like dozens of hands clawing through the drywall. The lights flickered violently. Dust rained from the ceiling, and something inside the wall began pushing outward. The wallpaper bulged, as if something large was trying to force its way into the room. Clara screamed from behind Ethan. "It's coming!" Robert shouted. "Down the stairs. That's the only way out." Ethan didn't hesitate. He ran toward the hidden staircase. The other guests followed. Behind them, the wall split open, and a pale hand pushed through the drywall. Then another, and another. Hundreds of hands. Scratching, reaching, pulling themselves out of the walls. As Ethan slammed the stairwell door shut behind them, he heard something whisper from the other side. A voice made from dozens of voices. "Room 707 is always full." The door shook violently. The scratching grew louder, and Ethan realized something horrifying. The hidden floor wasn't the prison. It was the feeding room. The stairwell door slammed shut behind Ethan. For a moment, the scratching from the walls above continued, wild, desperate, like dozens of hands clawing for escape. Then it slowly faded. Ethan and the others stood in darkness. A single emergency bulb flickered weakly over the concrete staircase. The air smelled damp and ancient. "This way," Robert Hale whispered. They descended carefully. The steps spiraled deeper beneath the hidden floor, far below the normal foundations of the hotel. Finally, the staircase ended at a heavy steel door. Rust covered the hinges. Above it, faded letters were scratched into the metal. Architectural control room. Ethan pushed the door open. Inside was a small office frozen in time. Old blueprints covered the walls. Dusty monitors. Control panels connected to elevator systems. And in the center of the room, one massive drawing. The original blueprint of the hotel. But between the 7th and 8th floors, the architect had drawn something disturbing. A sealed chamber, labeled in red ink. Containment level, 707. Ethan's stomach tightened. Marcus whispered behind him. Containment, for what? Ethan read the final note written in the corner of the blueprint. A warning from the architect himself. This building was never empty. We only built the hotel around it. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The words written on the blueprint seemed to press down on the room like weight. This building was never empty. We only built the hotel around it. Ethan stared at the message again, hoping he had misunderstood. But the handwriting was clear. Sharp. Desperate. The kind of writing someone leaves when they know they won't have time to explain later. Marcus finally broke the silence. "You're telling me the architect knew something was here before the hotel was even built?" Robert Hale stepped closer to the table. His pale fingers hovered over the blueprint like he had studied it for years. "Not just knew," Robert said quietly. "He tried to trap it." The blueprint showed the entire structure of the hotel. 14 floors. 2 basement levels. Stairwells. Elevator shafts. Everything. But between the 7th and 8th floors was something unusual. A narrow gap. A sealed level. Drawn in thick red lines. Inside it sat a single room. 707. And surrounding that room were dozens of small rectangular spaces, like hollow pockets inside the walls. Marcus leaned closer. "What are those?" Ethan followed his finger. They looked like vents or maintenance shafts, but they were too large, and too many. They formed a strange pattern around the room. "Like a cage." Robert whispered. "Those aren't vents." Ethan looked at him. "Then what are they?" Robert's voice dropped. "Paths." The room grew colder. Ethan studied the blueprint again. The small rectangular spaces formed tunnels that stretched through the walls of the hidden floor, and they all led to one place. Room 707. Marcus swallowed. "Paths for what?" Robert didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the dusty desk in the control room. Old folders were stacked across it. Most were rotting with age. But one folder looked different. It had been opened recently. Robert picked it up. The cover read, "Architectural Log, Daniel Kessler." Ethan felt a chill. "The architect," he said. Robert nodded. He kept records. Ethan opened the folder. Inside were dozens of typed pages. Handwritten notes filled the margins. Some of the pages were stained like someone had spilled water on them. "Otis." He began reading. Entry, April 12, 1982. The investors believe this project will be simple. A 14-story luxury hotel in the center of the city. They do not know what lies beneath the property, but the excavation crew has already reported strange sounds from the foundation. Scratching. Always scratching. Marcus shifted uneasily. That sound again. Ethan kept reading. Entry, May 3, 1982. The workers refuse to continue digging. They claim the ground is hollow. At night they hear movement beneath the concrete. One man said the walls were breathing. I told them it was air pressure. But I know better. Ethan turned the page. The handwriting in the margins became more frantic. Entry, June 18, 1982. We broke through today. There was an empty chamber beneath the soil. Not natural. Perfectly smooth walls. Too old to explain. Something had been living in that space long before this city existed. Marcus whispered, "This is insane." Robert shook his head slowly. "No. It explains everything." Ethan continued reading. Entry, July 2nd, 1982. The chamber cannot be destroyed. Every attempt to fill it collapses. The concrete cracks. The steel bends. Something pushes back. Ethan's pulse quickened. He flipped to the next page. Entry, August 14th, 1982. I have redesigned the building. Instead of destroying the chamber, we will contain it. The blueprint page attached to the entry showed the first design of the hidden floor. Room 707. Built directly above the underground chamber, surrounded by thick reinforced walls. And the tunnels. Marcus pointed again. The paths. Robert nodded slowly. Exactly. Ethan read the next entry. Entry, September 9th, 1982. Containment level complete. Room 707 is ready. The tunnels inside the walls will guide the movement toward the central chamber. If the thing beneath the hotel attempts to rise, it will be drawn into the room. Marcus looked confused. Why would it go there? Robert answered quietly. Because the room is bait. Ethan felt his stomach twist. Bait? Robert nodded. The architect created a place it would want. Ethan whispered. A place with people. No one spoke, because the truth had become obvious. Room 707 wasn't a prison. It was a trap, and the guests were the bait. Ethan turned to the final pages of the log. The last entries were messy, written quickly, like the architect had been running out of time. Entry, October 3rd, 1982. First guest assigned to room 707. Robert Hale. Robert's eyes darkened. I remember that night. Ethan looked at him. What happened? Robert swallowed slowly. I heard scratching inside the walls. Ethan looked back at the page. Entry, October 4th, 1982. Containment failed. It entered the room. The final page contained only one sentence. Written in thick black ink. It learns. The lights in the control room flickered. Marcus jumped. What was that? Ethan looked up. The ceiling trembled slightly, like something heavy had moved across the floor above them. Robert whispered, It knows we're here. Then the scratching started again. But this time, it wasn't coming from the walls above. It was coming from the concrete behind them, deep inside the foundation of the building. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Clara covered her ears. It's getting closer. Marcus grabbed Ethan's arm. What do we do? Ethan's eyes moved back to the blueprint. Something new caught his attention. Another staircase. Hidden. Leading even deeper below the control room. Into the underground chamber the architect had discovered. Marcus followed his gaze. You're not thinking about going down there, are you? Ethan didn't answer, because he already knew the truth. The scratching wasn't random. It was moving. Moving upward. Through the building. Through the tunnels inside the walls. Toward room 707. Toward the hidden floor. Toward them. Robert said quietly, If it reaches the room again, it will grow stronger. Ethan looked at him. How do you know? Robert's voice trembled. Because every time someone disappears, the scratching gets louder. The concrete wall behind them cracked suddenly. A thin line split across the surface. Dust fell to the floor. Marcus backed away in horror. It's coming through. Ethan grabbed the blueprint. There might still be a way to stop it. Marcus shouted. How? Ethan pointed to the underground chamber on the map. The architect tried to trap it from above. Marcus stared at him. You want to trap it from below? Ethan nodded slowly. If we seal the chamber, it can't reach the hidden floor. Robert looked toward the deeper staircase. That place is where it started. Ethan took a breath. Then that's where we end it. Behind them, the concrete wall bulged outward, like something enormous was pressing from the other side. The scratching turned into violent pounding. Marcus whispered, We're out of time. Ethan grabbed the flashlight from the desk. He looked at the staircase descending into darkness. The entrance to the underground chamber. The place where the architect had first discovered the thing beneath the hotel. Let's go, Ethan said. As they stepped onto the staircase, the wall behind them exploded open, and something long and pale slid through the crack. A hand, but not human. Too many fingers, too many joints, clawing across the floor, searching. The lights went out, and the scratching followed them down into the darkness. The staircase descended into complete darkness. Ethan moved first, gripping the flashlight tightly as its narrow beam cut through the black air. Behind him came Marcus, Clara, and the others. Robert Hale followed last. Above them, the broken wall in the control room still echoed with scratching. The thing had entered the building, and it was searching. The stairs spiraled downward far longer than Ethan expected. 10 steps. 20. 50. 100. Still the staircase continued. The deeper they went, the colder the air became. Not the normal chill of a basement. Something older. Something buried for centuries. Marcus whispered behind Ethan. "How deep does this go?" Ethan checked the blueprint he carried, but the lowest level of the drawing ended exactly where the control room had been. The staircase beneath it wasn't on the plan. "That's not possible," Ethan muttered. "What?" "This staircase wasn't designed by the architect." Marcus swallowed. "Then who built it?" Ethan didn't answer, because the truth felt obvious. This staircase had been here before the hotel. Finally, the steps ended. They stood before a massive stone doorway. Not modern construction. Not concrete. Not steel. Stone. Ancient stone. The surface was carved with symbols worn smooth by time. Clara whispered, "This place looks old." Robert nodded. "Older than the city." Ethan pushed the door. It opened slowly with a deep grinding sound, and the chamber beyond swallowed the light. The flashlight beam revealed something enormous. The underground chamber stretched wider than the entire hotel above. A massive cavern of smooth stone walls and vaulted ceilings. At the center stood a circular pit. Black. Bottomless. The air inside the chamber felt heavy. Thick. Like breathing inside a cave that had been sealed for centuries. Marcus stepped forward slowly. "This can't be real." Ethan scanned the chamber. Then the beam of his flashlight landed on something unexpected. Metal structures. Modern equipment. Cameras. Control panels. Thick cables running across the floor. Robert whispered, "The architect came down here." Ethan approached the equipment. Most of it was destroyed. Screens shattered. Panels ripped open. But one monitor still flickered weakly with static. He wiped dust from the control panel and pressed a button. The screen brightened. An old video recording appeared. The image was grainy. Black and white. A man stood in front of the camera. Thin. Nervous. Eyes filled with exhaustion. Daniel Kessler. The architect. The recording crackled to life. Kessler looked straight into the camera. "If anyone finds this, then containment has already failed." Marcus whispered, "That's him." Ethan watched the screen carefully. Kessler continued speaking. "When we discovered the chamber beneath the foundation, we believed it was an abandoned structure. But it wasn't. It was a nest." Clara covered her mouth. "A nest." Kessler nodded slowly on the recording. "We never saw the creature directly. But we heard it, moving beneath the stone. Scratching. Learning." Marcus whispered, "The same scratching." The video crackled. Kessler's voice became shakier. "It does not hunt like animals. It studies. It watches. And it builds." Ethan looked around the chamber again. The ancient stone walls. The endless tunnels carved into the rock. The unnatural symmetry of the cavern. Marcus followed his gaze. "You think it built this?" Robert answered quietly. "Or something like it." The recording continued. "We designed room 707 to trap it. To give it a place where it would gather. But we misunderstood something." Kessler's voice broke. "It doesn't just live in the walls. It becomes the walls." The screen suddenly filled with static. Then the image returned briefly. But Kessler wasn't standing calmly anymore. He was running. The camera shook violently. Behind him, the darkness of the chamber moved. Not like a shadow, like a living thing crawling across the walls. Kessler shouted into the camera, "It's inside the building now." The video ended. The monitor went black. For a long moment, no one spoke. Marcus finally whispered, "So, the hotel didn't trap it?" Robert shook his head slowly. "No, the hotel gave it a body." A loud cracking sound echoed through the chamber. Everyone jumped. Ethan turned his flashlight toward the ceiling. Dust rained down. Small stones rolled across the floor. Marcus's voice trembled. "It followed us." The scratching had returned, but now it surrounded them. From the walls, from the ceiling, from deep inside the pit at the center of the chamber, Clara whispered, "It's everywhere." Ethan stepped toward the pit. The darkness inside it swallowed the light from his flashlight. But something moved down there. Something vast. Something alive. Robert grabbed Ethan's arm. "Don't get closer." Ethan looked at him. "What is it?" Robert's voice was barely audible. "The heart of the nest." Suddenly, something moved inside the pit. A long pale shape rose slowly from the darkness. At first Ethan thought it was a limb, but as more of it emerged, he realized it was something worse. A body made of twisted arms. Hundreds of them, fused together like a living rope of hands, each one scratching against the stone walls as it climbed upward. Clara screamed. Marcus stumbled backward. "What the hell is that?" The creature continued rising. More limbs, more hands, more pale flesh sliding out of the pit, its surface constantly shifting, like hundreds of bodies trying to crawl free from one another. Robert whispered in horror, "That's only part of it." The walls of the chamber began to move. Hairline cracks spread across the stone. From each crack, hands pushed through. Dozens, hundreds, clawing into the chamber. Marcus shouted, "It's the entire building." Ethan understood suddenly. The tunnels, the walls, the hidden floor. Room 707. The creature wasn't trapped in the hotel. It was the hotel. The scratching grew deafening. The creature was waking completely now. Its limbs spread across the chamber walls, reaching, searching, learning. Then the elevator cables above the pit began to shake violently. Metal groaned. Something heavy moved through the shaft above them. Descending. Marcus whispered, "The elevator." The elevator car slammed down into the chamber from the darkness above. The doors opened slowly. Inside stood a single figure, perfectly still. Clara gasped, "That's impossible." The figure stepped forward. It looked human, almost, but its movements were slightly wrong. Too smooth, too controlled, like a puppet learning to walk. Robert stared at it in horror. "That's not a guest." Ethan whispered, "What is it?" The figure tilted its head. Its mouth opened slowly. And when it spoke, its voice sounded like dozens of voices layered together. "We are the hotel." The creature had learned something new. It had learned how to wear people. The figure took another step forward. "We thank you for coming downstairs." Behind it, the walls burst open completely. Hundreds of hands crawled into the chamber. The creature was no longer hiding. It was rising, and the hotel above them began to collapse. The chamber shook violently. Chunks of stone rained from the ceiling as the creature continued rising from the pit. Hundreds of pale hands clawed their way across the ancient walls, fingers digging into cracks in the rock as if the entire chamber itself were alive. Marcus stumbled backward. "This place is coming apart." But Ethan couldn't move. His eyes were fixed on the figure standing in front of the elevator. The thing that looked like a person. Almost human. Almost. Its posture was stiff, like it had studied human movement but hadn't fully mastered it yet. Its head tilted slowly to one side. Watching them. Learning them. Then it smiled. The expression was wrong. Not malicious. Not friendly. Just experimental. Like it was trying on a face. "We are the hotel," the figure repeated. Its voice layered over itself like dozens of whispers speaking at once. Ethan took a careful step forward. "What are you?" The figure's eyes flickered. "We are what was here before." Its voice echoed through the chamber. "We are what grew beneath the ground while your cities were still forests." Behind it, the creature continued climbing from the pit. More limbs, more hands, more pale bodies fused together into something that should not exist. Clara gasped, "It's endless." Robert Hale whispered, "It's been growing for centuries." The figure took another step toward them. The movement was smoother now, more confident. "We learned from you." Marcus stared at it. "What does that mean?" The figure raised one hand slowly. Its fingers stretched slightly too long. "We learned voices. We learned names. We learned how to be seen." Ethan's stomach dropped. "You're copying people." The figure smiled again. "We are becoming people." The walls of the chamber trembled. Cracks spread across the ancient stone as more hands pushed their way through. The creature was no longer hiding. It was unfolding. Marcus looked around in panic. The whole building is moving. Ethan realized he was right. The cables from the elevator shaft shook violently. The foundation above them groaned like metal under enormous pressure. The creature wasn't just inside the hotel. The hotel had become part of it. Robert suddenly stepped forward. "You've been taking the guests." The figure turned its head slowly toward him. "Yes." Robert's face hardened. "For 40 years." "Yes." Robert's voice shook. "You used us." The figure's eyes flickered again. "Used and learned." Behind them, the staircase leading back to the control room cracked open. Dust poured down the steps. Marcus shouted, "The floors above us are collapsing." Clara grabbed Ethan's arm. "We have to get out." But Ethan shook his head. "No." Marcus stared at him. "What do you mean no?" Ethan pointed toward the pit. "That thing isn't trapped anymore." The creature's massive body continued rising, filling the chamber with writhing pale limbs. "If it gets out of the hotel," Ethan continued, "it won't stop." Robert whispered, "He's right." The figure stepped closer again. It was only a few feet away now. Up close, Ethan could see something disturbing. Its skin wasn't smooth. It shifted slightly. Like hundreds of tiny shapes were moving beneath the surface. Faces. Half-formed. Half-remembered. Guess the creature had absorbed. Marcus noticed too. "Oh my God." The figure looked pleased. "You see, we are learning to be you." Clara whispered, "That's not learning, that's stealing." The figure tilted its head again. "Stealing is a human word." Suddenly the ground beneath them shook harder than before. The pit exploded upward. A massive section of the creature surged into the chamber. A towering mass of limbs and bodies twisting together like a living tower. Marcus screamed, "It's coming out." Ethan turned back toward the control equipment scattered around the chamber. The architect's machines. The cables. The broken monitors. He remembered something from the blueprint. The containment system. The architect had built the hidden floor to trap the creature from above. But the equipment down here had another purpose. Emergency collapse. Ethan ran to the control panel. Dust covered the switches, but the labels were still readable. Foundation lock. Structural seal. And one final switch, covered with a metal safety plate. Chamber purge. Marcus ran over. "What are you doing?" Ethan flipped the safety plate open. "If the architect couldn't trap it." Marcus's eyes widened. "You're going to bury it." Ethan nodded. This chamber was built beneath the entire building. "If it collapses." Robert finished the sentence quietly. "It will seal the creature underground again." Clara stared at him. "And us with it." Behind them, the creature rose higher. Its mass reached the ceiling of the chamber. Hundreds of arms slammed against the stone. The figure near them began walking faster now. Its movements almost normal. Almost human. "You must not do this," it said. Ethan looked at the switch. His hand trembled. Marcus grabbed his shoulder. "Ethan, if you pull that, we're dead." Ethan's voice was calm. "If we don't, everyone above us is." The creature's massive body slammed into the walls again. The chamber cracked open. Stone shattered. The creature was breaking free. The figure suddenly lunged toward Ethan. Too fast. Clara screamed. Robert tackled the creature before it reached him. The two crashed into the floor. But Robert's body began sinking into the creature's skin instantly. The flesh rippled like liquid. Robert screamed, "It's absorbing me." Ethan looked down at the switch. Marcus shouted, "Do it." Robert looked at Ethan one last time, and nodded. Ethan pulled the lever. For 1 second nothing happened. Then the entire chamber roared to life. Massive steel plates slid across the walls. Explosive charges detonated deep in the foundation. The stone ceiling began collapsing. The creature shrieked. The sound echoed through the chamber like thousands of voices screaming at once. Its massive body twisted violently, trying to escape, trying to reach the staircase, trying to reach the surface. Marcus grabbed Clara's arm. "Run!" They sprinted toward the staircase as the chamber crumbled behind them. Stone crashed down. Dust filled the air. The creature's limbs thrashed wildly. But the collapse was faster. The last thing Ethan saw before reaching the stairs was the creature's human figure standing in the middle of the chamber, its face calm, watching them, learning them, even now. Then the ceiling collapsed completely, and the creature disappeared beneath thousands of tons of stone. The staircase shook violently as Ethan, Marcus, and Clara climbed upward. Above them, the hotel groaned like a wounded animal. Floors cracked. Lights exploded. Glass shattered. Marcus gasped for breath. "Tell me that worked." Ethan didn't answer, because the scratching sound had stopped. Completely. And that silence felt even worse. Ethan and the others escaped the collapsing building, but discover something horrifying. The hotel is still standing, and the elevator to room 707 is still running. The staircase trembled beneath their feet as Ethan, Marcus, and Clara ran upward through the darkness. Dust poured down from above. The walls groaned like something massive was shifting inside them. The collapse of the chamber had shaken the entire foundation of the hotel. Marcus nearly slipped on the broken concrete steps. "Move," he shouted, grabbing the railing. Behind them, deep in the earth, the sound of stone grinding against stone echoed through the stairwell. The chamber was collapsing, burying everything beneath it, including the creature. At least, that's what Ethan hoped. They reached the control room door and pushed through it. The room looked worse than before. The cracked wall where the creature's hand had broken through had widened into a jagged hole. Chunks of concrete littered the floor. Marcus slammed the door behind them. The scratching sounds were gone now. Completely gone. Only the rumbling of the collapsing foundation remained. Clara leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "Tell me we stopped it." Ethan stared down the staircase. The darkness below had swallowed the chamber. "We buried it," he said quietly. "But I don't know if that means it's gone." The building shuddered again. The ceiling lights flickered violently. Marcus looked toward the stairwell leading back to the hidden floor. "We need to get out of this place." No one argued. They climbed the stairs quickly, moving past the control room and back toward the hidden level between the 7th and 8th floors. The hallway outside the stairwell looked different now. Damaged. The walls were cracked. Sections of drywall had split open. The long corridors of the hidden floor looked like they had aged decades in a matter of minutes. Clara stepped carefully over a broken ceiling tile. Room 707 should be right there. She pointed down the hall. The door still stood at the end of the corridor, exactly where it had been before. Untouched. Marcus frowned. That door should have collapsed. Ethan felt a chill crawl up his spine. Everything else on the floor had been damaged by the collapse below. But room 707 looked perfectly intact. The door slowly creaked open. On its own. None of them touched it. Marcus whispered, "Okay, that's not good." Inside the room, the lights flickered on. The soft yellow glow spilled into the hallway. The same normal hotel room they had seen before. Bed. Desk. Closet. Bathroom door slightly open. Perfectly ordinary. Clara whispered, "That room doesn't belong here." Ethan stepped forward slowly. Marcus grabbed his arm. "You're not going back in there." Ethan looked at the doorway. "I have to know something." "What?" "If the creature survived." Marcus sighed. "Of course you do." They entered the room together. Everything inside looked exactly as it had earlier. Untouched. Unbroken. The bed was still made neatly. The television still sat on the dresser. The air inside the room felt warm. Comfortable. Clara whispered, "This place feels alive." Ethan moved toward the bathroom. He pushed the door open slowly. Inside was the same narrow space. White tiles. Mirror above the sink. But something had changed. The mirror was cracked now, and written across the glass with long, dragging scratches were 3 words. "We are learning." Marcus stepped back. "Oh hell no." The lights flickered again. The television suddenly turned on. Static filled the screen. Then an image appeared. Security footage. From the hotel lobby. Ethan stepped closer to the TV. "What is that?" Marcus leaned in. The footage looked recent. The front desk. The revolving door. The elevator bank. And people. Guests walking through the lobby. Completely normal. Clara whispered, "But the hotel is supposed to be empty." Marcus nodded slowly. "Not anymore." The camera angle changed. Now it showed the elevators. One of them opened. A man stepped out. He looked around the lobby calmly, adjusted his jacket, then walked toward the front desk. Ethan felt his stomach twist. Because the man looked familiar, Marcus noticed too. Wait. That guy. Clara's voice trembled. That's Robert. The three of them stared at the screen. Robert Hale, the man who had been pulled into the creature's body in the underground chamber. The man who should have died when the chamber collapsed. But the man in the lobby looked completely fine. Perfectly human. He even smiled at the receptionist. Marcus whispered, "That's impossible." Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, not impossible." Clara looked at him. "What do you mean?" Ethan pointed at the screen. "Remember what the creature said." Marcus finished the sentence quietly. "We are learning to be you." The screen flickered again. Another camera view appeared. This time from a hallway. The man who looked like Robert was walking toward an elevator. He pressed the button. The doors opened. Inside the elevator, a familiar number glowed on the control panel. 7. But there was another button below it. A button that shouldn't exist. Marcus leaned closer. "What floor is that?" The number was faint, but still readable. 707. The elevator doors closed. The camera feed cut to black. The television turned off by itself. The room fell silent. Clara whispered, "It survived." Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, it evolved." The hallway outside room 707 creaked. Footsteps echoed faintly through the hidden floor. Slow. Careful. Someone walking down the corridor. Ethan stepped toward the door. Marcus grabbed him. "Don't." But Ethan already knew. If the creature had learned to wear people, then it wasn't trapped underground anymore. It had found another way out. The footsteps stopped outside the room. A shadow appeared beneath the door. Someone standing in the hallway. Waiting. Listening. Then a calm voice spoke through the door. A voice that sounded perfectly human. But Ethan recognized it instantly. "Room service." The doorknob began to turn. Slowly. The doorknob turned slowly. A soft clicking sound echoed in the silent room. Marcus backed away immediately. "Ethan, don't open that." But Ethan wasn't touching the door. The knob was turning on its own. The footsteps outside had stopped. Whoever stood in the hallway was waiting. Listening. Learning. The door creaked open a few inches. The hallway beyond was dimly lit by flickering emergency lights. A man stood outside, dressed in a hotel uniform. Black vest. White shirt. Name tag. He looked completely normal. But Ethan's chest tightened instantly. Because he recognized the face. Robert Hale. Or something wearing Robert Hale. The man smiled politely. "Good evening." His voice was calm. Friendly. Almost perfectly human. Marcus whispered behind Ethan. "That thing died downstairs." The man tilted his head slightly. Almost the same way the creature had earlier in the chamber. "Yes," he said softly. "We did." Clara stepped back. "You're not Robert." The man smiled again. "No, but we remember him." Ethan's mind raced. The chamber had collapsed. The creature had been buried. But the thing standing in the hallway wasn't the massive body they saw underground. This was something smaller. A piece of it. A fragment that had escaped. Or worse. Something the creature had already created before the collapse. The man stepped 1 foot inside room 707. His movements were smooth now. Confident. Human. "We appreciate your assistance." Marcus shouted. "Stay back." The man stopped walking. Still smiling. "You helped us grow." Clara whispered to Ethan. "Room 707. Ethan nodded slowly. "I think I understand now." Marcus looked between them. "Understand what?" Ethan pointed at the doorway. "This room isn't a trap. It's a gate." The man in the doorway nodded approvingly. "Yes." Ethan continued. "The architect didn't build this room to contain the creature. He built it to study it." The man nodded again. "And you learned from that?" "Yes." Marcus shook his head. "You're saying this thing can leave the hotel?" Ethan looked at the doorway. "I think it already has." The man's smile widened slightly. "Correct." He stepped fully inside the room now. And when he did, the hallway behind him changed. The corridor stretched farther than it should. The lights flickered. Doors appeared along the walls that hadn't existed before. Room numbers glowing faintly. More rooms spreading into the distance. Growing. Multiplying. Clara gasped. It's building more. Marcus whispered. It's spreading. The man turned toward them. We are expanding. Hotels are perfect structures. Temporary people. Temporary names. Temporary memories. Ethan's stomach dropped. You're going to spread through hotels. The man's voice remained calm. Yes. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. How many of you are there? The man answered simply. As many as needed. Behind him, the hallway continued growing. Rooms forming from nothing. Walls stretching outward. The building was changing. Transforming. Clara whispered. It's using the rooms to move. Ethan realized she was right. Every room was like a small doorway. A place where the creature could appear. Where it could take someone. Learn them. Become them. Marcus looked at Ethan urgently. Then we have to destroy the room. Ethan looked around. The room itself looked normal. But now he understood. The walls weren't walls. The floor wasn't a floor. The entire space was part of the creature. The man watched them calmly. You cannot stop this. We are already inside your world. Ethan's eyes moved to the window. The city skyline stretched beyond the glass. Hundreds of buildings. Thousands of rooms. Hotels everywhere. The creature spoke again. You built perfect nests for us. Marcus suddenly grabbed a lamp from the desk and smashed it against the wall. Electric sparks burst from the outlet. Clara understood instantly. Fire. Marcus nodded. If the room is part of the creature, then we burn it. The man's smile faded slightly. That would be unfortunate. Marcus ripped the curtain from the window. Clara grabbed the bed sheets. Ethan pulled wires from the broken lamp. Within seconds they had built a crude pile in the center of the room. Marcus struck his lighter. A small flame appeared. The man stepped forward quickly. You must not do this. Marcus didn't hesitate. He dropped the flame. The fire caught instantly. Curtains ignited. Sheets burned. Smoke filled the room. The walls began to twitch, like flesh reacting to pain. The man staggered. His calm expression broke for the first time. We are not ready. The hallway behind him began collapsing. Doors vanished. Walls twisted. The creature was losing control of the space. Ethan grabbed Clara's arm. Run! They rushed past the creature and into the corridor. Marcus followed. Behind them, flames spread across the room. Room 707 burned like living tissue. The creature screamed. Not with one voice, but with hundreds. They ran toward the stairwell as the hidden floor began collapsing again. Smoke poured through the hallway. The fire spread quickly. Room by room. Wall by wall. Marcus slammed the stairwell door open. Down! They ran down the stairs as alarms began screaming throughout the hotel. Sprinklers burst to life above them. Water poured through the building. When they finally reached the lobby, guests were evacuating. Confused. Panicked. Security rushed through the doors. Fire alarms screamed. Ethan turned back toward the elevators. One of them opened. Smoke poured out, but the inside of the elevator looked normal. Perfectly clean. And on the control panel, the button for 707 was gone. Marcus looked at Ethan. Did we kill it? Ethan stared at the burning upper floors through the lobby windows. I don't know. Clara whispered. But the room is gone. Ethan nodded slowly. Yes. For now. Outside, firefighters arrived. Crowds gathered on the street. Smoke poured from the upper floors of the hotel. Room 707 burned somewhere above them, destroying whatever doorway the creature had built. But as Ethan looked across the city skyline, he noticed something that made his stomach sink. Across the street stood another hotel, a tall glass tower. And near the top floor, one window flickered strangely, like a light turning on inside an empty room. A room with no number. Somewhere inside that building, a door slowly opened. Story 2. At 2:46 a.m., the last train of the night pulled into Ashford Central Station. The platform was almost empty. Just one tired janitor mopping the tiles. A security guard scrolling through his phone. And Noah Carter, the night shift train operator, waiting inside the driver's cabin. The doors opened with a mechanical hiss. Two passengers stepped out. No one stepped in. That was normal. At this hour, the subway system was practically dead. Noah checked the monitor beside him. Final route, line 7. Last stop, Westbrook Terminal. Everything looked routine. He closed the doors and pushed the control lever. The train rolled forward into the dark tunnel. Noah had worked this route for 8 years. He knew every curve in the tracks, every signal light, every station. Ashford Central, Grant Street, Lincoln Market, Park Row, Westbrook Terminal. 5 stops, 23 minutes. Then he went home. Simple, predictable, boring. The train passed Grant Street Station without stopping, closed for maintenance at night. The platform lights were off. Just a dark blur through the window. Noah didn't think about it. He kept the train moving. 3 minutes later the train slowed for Lincoln Market Station. No passengers were waiting there either. But the schedule required a stop. The doors opened. Silence. No footsteps. No voices. No one boarding. Noah checked the camera monitor. The empty platform stretched under pale yellow lights. Except for one thing. A bench near the far wall. Someone was sitting there. Noah leaned closer to the screen. It looked like a woman. Long dark hair. White coat. She wasn't moving. Just sitting. Facing the tracks. Noah pressed the intercom. Last train. Are you boarding? No response. The woman didn't move. Didn't look up. Didn't even blink. Noah frowned. The doors had already been opened 20 seconds. Too long. He pressed the button to close them. The train began to move again. As it left the station, Noah glanced back at the camera feed. The woman was gone. The bench was empty. Probably walked off, Noah muttered. Still, something about it bothered him. But the train was already entering the next tunnel. 2 minutes later he checked the route display again. And froze. The screen showed something new. A station name he had never seen before. Next stop, Hollow Platform. Noah frowned. That's not on line 7. He checked the printed route chart taped beside the control panel. Grant Street. Lincoln Market. Park Row. Westbrook Terminal. No hollow platform. The train slowed automatically. Noah grabbed the radio. Control, this is train 7N. I've got an unknown stop on my system. Static filled the speaker. Then a voice responded. But it wasn't the dispatcher. It was a whisper. Please stop the train. Noah pulled the radio away slowly. Control. No answer. Just static. The train continued slowing. The tunnel lights flickered outside the window. Then something appeared ahead. A platform. Noah's stomach dropped. There was no station here. He had driven this tunnel hundreds of times. There was nothing between Lincoln Market and Park Row. Just empty track. Solid concrete. But now a platform existed. Dim lights. Old tiles. A faded station sign. The train stopped automatically. The doors opened. The station sign read, Hollow Platform. Noah stared at it, confused, uneasy, because the station didn't look abandoned. It looked old, like it had been closed for decades. Dust covered everything. The lights flickered weakly. And standing on the platform, waiting for the train, were people, dozens of them, silent, still, watching the train. Noah leaned toward the microphone. Passengers, this stop is not part of the route. None of them moved. None of them blinked. Then one of them stepped forward. A man in an old subway uniform. The kind conductors wore 30 or 40 years ago. He walked slowly toward the driver's cabin window. Noah felt a chill run through his spine. Because the man's face looked pale. Too pale. And his eyes looked empty. Like glass. The man tapped on the window. 3 slow knocks. Then he smiled. And spoke words Noah could hear through the glass. You're not supposed to stop here. Behind him, all the people on the platform turned toward the train at the same time. And the doors were still open. The doors of the train remained open. Noah's hands hovered over the control panel, frozen. Outside the driver's cabin window, the man in the old subway uniform stared at him with that same unnatural smile. Behind him, dozens of silent figures waited on the platform. None of them blinked. None of them moved. They simply watched. Noah forced himself to breathe. Okay, this isn't real, he muttered. Maybe the system had glitched. Maybe the train had somehow stopped at an unfinished station. Maybe those people were workers, maintenance crews, night staff, anything but what his mind was starting to imagine. The man outside the window tapped the glass again. 3 slow knocks. The sound echoed inside the cabin. Noah grabbed the radio. "Control, this is train 7N. I need confirmation on an emergency stop." Static crackled through the speaker. For several seconds there was nothing. Then the dispatcher's voice came through. "Clear. Normal. Train 7N, this is Control. Go ahead." Relief flooded Noah's chest. "Control, my system shows a station called Hollow Platform between Lincoln Market and Park Row. I need verification." There was a pause. A long one. Then the dispatcher answered carefully. "Repeat that name." Noah glanced at the station sign outside the window. "Hollow Platform." Silence returned to the radio. Not static, just silence. Outside the train, something changed. The people on the platform moved. Just slightly. Their heads tilted. Listening. Noah lowered his voice. "Control." The dispatcher returned, but his tone had changed. Tight. Uneasy. "Train 7N, you are not supposed to stop there." Noah stared at the control panel. "I didn't stop it. The train did." "Listen carefully," the dispatcher said. "You need to close your doors and continue to Park Row immediately." Noah looked back out the window. The man in the old uniform was still smiling. Still staring. "Control," Noah said slowly. "There are people on the platform." Another pause. Then the dispatcher whispered something Noah barely heard. "That's not possible." One of the passengers outside stepped forward. A woman wearing an old dress. The kind people wore in the early 1990s. Her hair hung over her face. She raised one hand slowly and waved. Noah felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. "They are moving," he said into the radio. "Control, they are looking at me." The dispatcher's breathing grew louder through the speaker. "Train 7N, do not let them board." The man outside the window leaned closer. His pale face nearly touched the glass. Then he spoke again. This time Noah heard him clearly. Not through the radio, through the metal of the train itself. "You already stopped." Behind him, the crowd began walking toward the train. Slow. Silent. Noah slammed the door close button. Nothing happened. The doors stayed open. His heart started pounding. "Control, the doors aren't responding." "Override them," the dispatcher shouted. Noah pulled the emergency lever. Still nothing. The train controls weren't responding at all. The first passenger stepped onto the train. The woman in the old dress. She walked through the doorway without making a sound. Her shoes didn't even echo on the floor. Another followed. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, a line of silent passengers began entering the subway car. Each one dressed differently. Different decades. Different styles. Some looked like commuters. Some looked like construction workers. Some wore clothing that hadn't been common for 30 years. Noah whispered, "Control, they are boarding." The dispatcher's voice cracked. "No, no, no." The man in the old subway uniform stepped onto the train last. He walked straight down the aisle toward the driver's cabin. Noah could see him through the mirror above the control panel. The man stopped outside the cabin door and knocked. 3 slow taps. Noah didn't move. The man waited, still smiling. The radio crackled again. The dispatcher's voice came through, urgent now. "Train 7N, listen to me carefully." Noah grabbed the microphone. "I'm listening. You need to leave that station immediately." "I told you, the train won't move." The dispatcher hesitated, then said something strange. "Then you need to move it manually." Noah frowned. "Manually?" "Yes." The dispatcher lowered his voice. "There's a maintenance lever under the control panel. It disconnects the automated routing system." Noah reached beneath the dashboard. His fingers brushed cold metal. A small lever hidden under a protective plate. The man outside the cabin knocked again. Harder this time. The metal door rattled. "Control," Noah whispered. "What happens if I don't leave?" The dispatcher didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded distant, almost afraid. Hollow Platform was removed from the map in 1987. Noah felt his stomach tighten. "Why?" The dispatcher exhaled slowly, because a train disappeared there. The passengers inside the subway car began sitting down, one by one, silently, filling every seat, facing forward, watching the driver's cabin. Noah whispered, "What do you mean disappeared?" The dispatcher answered quietly, "Train 5D entered the tunnel between Lincoln Market and Park Row. It never reached the next station." The man outside the cabin door leaned closer to the glass window. His smile widened slightly. "They searched the tunnel for weeks," the dispatcher continued. "No wreckage, no derailment, no bodies, just an empty stretch of track." The cabin door shook violently as the man pounded on it. Marcus, no, Noah, flinched. The passengers outside the cabin began standing again, slowly. But 3 days later, the dispatcher whispered, "The train came back." Noah's breath caught. "Came back?" "Yes." It rolled into Park Row Station by itself. The man's face outside the cabin pressed against the window now. His eyes looked wrong. Too dark. Too empty. The dispatcher continued. All the passengers were still inside. Noah whispered, "Alive?" The dispatcher answered softly, "No." The cabin door bent inward with another violent hit. The metal hinges creaked. "What happened to them?" Noah asked. The dispatcher's voice trembled. "They were wrong." The man outside the cabin spoke again, his voice somehow echoing through the metal walls. "You stayed too long." The cabin door cracked. The lock snapped. Noah pulled the maintenance lever. The control panel flickered. Lights flashed across the dashboard. The train engines roared back to life. The subway lurched forward. Hard. The open doors slammed shut. The platform outside vanished into darkness. But as the train accelerated through the tunnel, Noah looked in the mirror above the control panel and felt his heart stop. The passengers were still there. All of them, sitting quietly in the subway car, and every single one of them was staring directly at him. The train sped through the tunnel, faster than normal. The engine roared louder than Noah had ever heard before. But Noah barely noticed, because in the mirror above the control panel, the passengers were still there. Every seat in the car was filled. Dozens of silent figures staring forward, staring at him. Noah slowly picked up the radio again. His voice came out as a whisper. "Control, they're still on the train." Static crackled. Then the dispatcher answered quietly. "How many?" Noah checked the mirror again. "At least 30. There was a pause on the other end of the radio. Then the dispatcher sighed. "Yeah, that sounds about right." Noah felt his stomach drop. "You knew about them." The dispatcher didn't answer immediately. Instead he asked a strange question. "Are they moving?" Noah looked again. Every passenger sat perfectly still, hands in their laps, eyes forward. "Not yet." "Good," the dispatcher said softly. "Keep it that way." The train began slowing. Noah glanced at the route display. Next stop, Park Row. Relief washed over him. A normal station. A normal stop. People. Security. Cameras. If these passengers tried anything strange, someone else would see it too. But something felt wrong. The passengers hadn't moved. Not a single one had shifted in their seats. Not even slightly. Noah pressed the intercom. "Attention passengers. Next stop is Park Row Station." None of them reacted. Not a blink. Not a breath. The train rolled into the bright lights of Park Row Station. The platform was busy even at this hour. Cleaning crews. Security guards. 2 late-night commuters waiting for the train. Everything looked normal. The doors opened. A rush of fresh air entered the subway car. Noah waited, watching the mirror. No one got off. The passengers remained seated, silent, watching the driver's cabin. One of the commuters on the platform stepped inside, a young man wearing headphones. He froze when he saw the car. Every seat filled with silent passengers. No one talking. No one moving. The man slowly removed his headphones. "Ah!" He looked down the aisle, then quickly stepped back out onto the platform. Noah grabbed the radio again. "Control, they are not leaving." "I told you they wouldn't," the dispatcher said. Noah felt anger rising. "You knew this would happen." "Yes." "Then why didn't you warn me?" The dispatcher sighed. "Because if we told every driver the truth, None of them would run the trains anymore. Noah stared into the mirror again. One of the passengers moved. Just slightly. The man in the old subway uniform. He slowly turned his head toward the window, looking at the platform, watching people walking past, studying them. Noah whispered, "They are learning." The dispatcher went silent. The station announcement echoed through the speakers. "Train departing. Stand clear of the doors." The doors closed automatically. The train began moving again. Noah watched the passengers carefully. This time more of them moved. Small movements. Tiny adjustments. Like people waking from a long sleep. A woman brushed dust from her coat. A man straightened his tie. Another passenger blinked slowly. Noah's heart pounded. They're waking up. The dispatcher's voice came back quickly. "Don't stop the train again." "What?" "You heard me." The tunnel lights flashed past the windows. The train accelerated toward the next station, Grant Street. But the dispatcher continued, "You cannot stop this train tonight." Noah stared at the radio. "That's insane. There are passengers inside." "They are not passengers." Behind him, someone stood up. Noah saw it in the mirror. The woman in the old dress. She walked slowly down the aisle, toward the driver's cabin. Noah whispered, "One of them is moving." The dispatcher's voice dropped. "Lock the cabin door." Noah slammed the lock switch. The metal door sealed shut. The woman stopped outside the cabin. She stared through the small glass window. Her face was pale. Her eyes looked cloudy, like fogged glass. She raised her hand slowly, and knocked. 3 soft taps. Noah's skin went cold. "Control." The dispatcher finished the sentence for him. "They always knock 3 times. More passengers stood up, one by one, walking down the aisle, joining the woman outside the cabin door. Noah whispered, "They're all coming forward." "Don't open the door," the dispatcher said firmly. "I wasn't planning to." The train approached the next station, Grant Street. The platform lights appeared ahead in the tunnel. But something strange happened. The train didn't slow down. It passed the station at full speed. Noah grabbed the controls. "Control, the brakes aren't responding." "I know. You did this." "Yes." The passengers outside the cabin began knocking again. 3 taps. Over and over. In perfect rhythm. "Listen carefully," the dispatcher said. "Noah, they can't leave the train unless you let them." Noah stared at the door. "What happens if they do?" The dispatcher hesitated, then answered quietly, "We think they replace people." Noah's heart nearly stopped. "Replace them?" "Yes. They study passengers. They watch behavior. They learn how people move, how they talk, how they live." The knocking grew louder. The metal door began bending inward. "And when they understand enough," the dispatcher continued, "they get off the train." Noah whispered, "And then what?" The dispatcher answered softly, "Then we lose track of them." The cabin door cracked. One of the hinges snapped. The woman outside smiled faintly. The train roared through another tunnel. Faster! Faster! Noah looked ahead at the dark track stretching into the distance. Then he saw something that made his blood freeze. Another platform. In the tunnel. A station that didn't belong there. The sign flickered in the darkness. Dust covered the old tiles. And the words glowed faintly. "Hollow platform." The train was going back. The dispatcher whispered through the radio. "Oh no." The passengers outside the cabin stopped knocking. All of them turned toward the front window, watching the station approach. Waiting. The tunnel ahead grew darker. The lights along the track flickered weakly as the train sped forward. And there it was again. The station that wasn't supposed to exist. Hollow platform. The same cracked tiles. The same broken station sign hanging above the platform. The same dim yellow lights buzzing faintly like dying insects. Noah gripped the control panel so hard his knuckles turned white. "Control," he whispered into the radio. "We're going back." Static crackled. Then the dispatcher's voice returned, tight with panic. "That's not possible." "Well, it's happening." Behind Noah, the passengers had stopped knocking. That terrified him more than the pounding. In the mirror above the dashboard, he could see them standing silently in the aisle, all of them facing forward, watching the station grow closer through the front window, waiting. The train began slowing. Not because Noah touched the controls, because something else was controlling it. The brakes engaged automatically. Metal screeched against metal as the train rolled toward the platform. No, 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 Noah muttered. He grabbed the manual lever and pulled it back. Nothing. The train ignored him. Control. I can't stop it. The dispatcher didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded distant, almost defeated. Every train that stops there eventually comes back. Noah's stomach dropped. What does that mean? It means hollow platform doesn't just appear once. The train slowed further. The broken platform lights slid past the front window. Dust covered everything, like the station had been abandoned for decades. But something else had changed. The platform was crowded now. Dozens of figures stood waiting under the flickering lights. More than before. Far more. Men, women, children, all of them silent. All of them staring at the approaching train. Noah felt cold sweat run down his back. There are more of them. The dispatcher whispered. There always are. The train came to a stop. The doors opened. A loud metallic hiss echoed through the car. The platform was only a few feet away, and the waiting crowd began moving. Slowly, quietly, walking toward the train. Noah looked into the mirror. The passengers inside the car stepped aside, clearing the doorway, making space. They are letting them in, Noah whispered. The dispatcher didn't reply, because they both knew what was happening. The first figure stepped onto the train. A man wearing a subway conductor's hat, old-fashioned, from decades ago. He walked past the silent passengers already on board, and sat down calmly in an empty seat. Another followed, then another, and another. The train was filling again. New passengers replacing the old ones, or joining them. Noah wasn't sure which was worse. Then someone stepped onto the train that made Noah's heart stop. A man wearing a modern business suit, holding a briefcase. He looked normal, completely normal, except Noah recognized his face. Control, Noah whispered. Yes. I think one of them was a real passenger. The dispatcher inhaled sharply. Describe him. Brown suit. Late 30s. Short hair. The dispatcher was silent for several seconds. Then he whispered something that chilled Noah's blood. That man disappeared 3 weeks ago. The train doors slammed shut. The platform vanished as the train began moving again. But the crowd inside the car was larger now. Too large. More than the train should have been able to hold. The passengers in the aisle slowly turned toward the cabin again. Their cloudy eyes focused on Noah, studying him, watching how he moved, how he spoke, how he breathed. The man in the old subway uniform stepped forward again. He knocked on the cabin door. 3 slow taps. The door bent inward slightly. The metal frame cracked. They were stronger this time. Noah shouted into the radio. What do I do? The dispatcher answered immediately. You keep the train moving. Where? Anywhere except that station. The train raced deeper into the tunnel, faster than any normal subway speed. The walls blurred past the windows, but the passengers didn't react. They stood calmly, patiently. Then one of them spoke, the woman in the old dress. Her voice sounded dry, like she hadn't used it in years. Driver. Noah froze. Control, they are talking now. The dispatcher's voice trembled. That's new. The woman continued speaking. Driver, you stayed too long. The same words the conductor on the platform had spoken earlier. More passengers began whispering. Soft voices filling the subway car. Hundreds of whispers overlapping, repeating the same phrase. You stayed too long. You stayed too long. You stayed too long. The cabin door cracked further. A piece of metal snapped off and fell to the floor. Noah looked ahead through the windshield. Another station was approaching, but this one looked normal. Bright lights, clean tiles, people waiting. The station sign came into view. Ashford Central, the first stop on the route, the beginning of the line. No, Noah whispered. The train was returning to the city, to real passengers, real people. The dispatcher realized it at the same time. Oh God! If the doors opened at Ashford Central, those things would walk out into the crowd, and no one would know the difference. The passengers outside the cabin smiled. Dozens of pale faces pressed against the glass, watching the station approach. Waiting. The train began slowing. Noah grabbed the emergency brake with shaking hands. "Control, if they get off here." The dispatcher answered quietly. "I know." The station platform was full of commuters, night workers, security guards, cleaning crews, all waiting for the train. The doors prepared to open. Behind Noah, the passengers stood silently, ready, and the train was about to stop. The train slowed as it entered Ashford Central Station. Bright white lights flooded through the front window of the driver's cabin. The platform outside was crowded. Night commuters, cleaning crews, security guards walking their patrol routes, completely unaware of what was inside the subway car. Noah's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Behind him, the passengers from hollow platforms stood silently in the aisle. Dozens of them, waiting, watching the doors. The station announcement echoed through the train's speakers. "Now arriving at Ashford Central. Please stand clear of the doors." The brakes screeched. The train came to a stop. Noah stared at the door controls. The door open indicator flashed green. The system was ready. All it needed was one command. Behind him, the man in the old subway uniform stepped closer to the cabin door. He knocked again. 3 slow taps. The cracked metal door shuddered under the impact. It wouldn't hold much longer. Noah grabbed the radio. "Control, we're at the station." "I see it on the monitor," the dispatcher replied. His voice sounded tight with fear. "Don't open the doors." "No kidding." The passengers outside the train windows started approaching. Normal commuters. A woman with a backpack. A janitor pushing a cleaning cart. 2 college students laughing quietly. All of them waiting for the doors to slide open. Noah whispered, "They're right outside." The dispatcher exhaled slowly. "If those things leave the train, we lose them." "What does that mean?" "It means they disappear into the city." Behind Noah, the cabin door bent inward again. Metal groaned. Another hinge snapped loose. The passengers outside the door were pushing harder now. The woman in the old dress spoke again. Her voice was clearer this time. Almost normal. "Driver, open the doors." The other passengers repeated her words in quiet whispers. "Open the doors. Open the doors. Open the doors." Noah stared at the control panel. His finger hovered over the emergency brake. If he triggered it now, the train would lock down. Doors sealed. System frozen. But there was a problem. "Control," Noah said slowly. "Yes." "What happens if we stay here too long?" The dispatcher didn't answer immediately. Finally he said quietly, "They learn." Noah felt a cold wave move through his chest. "What do you mean?" "The longer they stay near real passengers, the better they understand how to act human." Outside the train, the commuters grew impatient. One man knocked on the subway door. "Hey, open up." Another passenger waved toward the driver's cabin. "What's the delay?" Inside the car, the passengers from hollow platforms stood perfectly still, listening, watching, learning. The man in the old subway uniform leaned closer to the cracked cabin door. His pale eyes focused on Noah. "You stayed too long." The door frame snapped loudly. A crack split across the metal. Another hit like that would break it completely. Noah grabbed the radio again. "Control, the cabin door won't hold." "I know." "Then what do I do?" The dispatcher took a long breath. When he spoke again, his voice sounded resigned. "There's only one way to stop them." Noah's stomach tightened. "What is it?" "You can't let the train leave this station." Noah frowned. "That makes no sense." "If the train leaves," the dispatcher continued, "they'll keep riding. They'll keep learning. And eventually, they'll find another station." Noah looked back at the cracked door. The passengers outside were pressing harder. The metal frame bent inward another inch. "So what are you saying?" Noah asked. The dispatcher's voice dropped to a whisper. "You have to disable the train permanently." Noah stared at the dashboard. "You mean crash it?" "Yes." The word hung in the air like a heavy weight. "Crash the train. At the station. In front of dozens of innocent people." "No," Noah said. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." Behind him, the cabin door finally burst open. Metal tore free from the hinges. The woman in the old dress stepped into the cabin. Her cloudy eyes focused on Noah. "Driver," she said calmly. "Open the doors." The other passengers crowded behind her. Their pale faces filled the doorway. Dozens of them, all smiling now. Noah grabbed the throttle. The train engine roared to life. The woman's smile widened. "Yes," she whispered. "Take us into the city." Noah looked through the windshield. The platform was only a few feet ahead. People were standing dangerously close to the edge. If the train accelerated now, the dispatcher shouted through the radio. "Noah, do it." Noah's hand trembled on the controls. Behind him, the passengers stepped closer. The woman leaned beside him, her face inches from his. "Open the doors," she whispered again. Noah suddenly pushed the throttle forward. Hard. The train shot forward. The passengers inside the cabin screamed. Not in fear, in anger. The subway roared past the platform. The waiting commuters jumped back in shock. The train blasted through Ashford Central without stopping. Behind Noah, the passengers clawed at him, hands grabbing his shoulders, his arms, his jacket. "You stayed too long," they screamed together. The train sped into the tunnel again, faster than before, faster than any subway should move. The dispatcher's voice came through the radio. "Noah, what are you doing?" Noah's eyes stayed fixed on the track ahead. "I'm taking it somewhere else." "Where?" Noah saw the signal lights ahead. A maintenance junction. An unused track that led to an abandoned tunnel. A dead end. His voice was calm now. "I'm taking them back." Behind him, the passengers screamed louder, realizing what he meant. The train thundered down the dark track, straight toward the sealed tunnel. And Noah never touched the brakes. The train thundered down the maintenance track. The tunnel ahead was darker than the main line. No signal lights. No maintenance lamps. Just endless black concrete rushing toward them. Noah held the throttle forward. The subway engine screamed under the pressure. Behind him, chaos exploded inside the cabin. The passengers from hollow platform were no longer silent. They clawed at the walls, at the windows, at Noah. "You stayed too long." Their voices merged into a single screaming chorus. Dozens of hands grabbed his shoulders. His jacket tore as they pulled. But Noah didn't slow down. "Control," he said into the radio, breathing hard. "Do you see the maintenance tunnel on your map?" Static answered him. Then the dispatcher returned. "Yes, I see it." His voice sounded confused. "You're not supposed to be there." "I know." Ahead, a massive steel gate appeared in the tunnel. Rust covered its surface. Old warning signs hung crookedly across the bars. One of them read, "Tunnel sealed, 1987. Noah's pulse raced. "That's it, right?" The dispatcher hesitated. "Yes. That's the tunnel we sealed after the first train disappeared." The passengers heard that. Their screaming grew louder. They pushed forward toward the control panel, trying to reach the throttle, trying to stop the train. The woman in the old dress grabbed Noah's arm. Her grip was unbelievably strong. "You stayed too long," she hissed. "You belong with us now." Noah slammed his elbow into her and broke free. The train sped faster. The steel gate rushed closer. "Control," Noah shouted. "What's behind that gate?" The dispatcher's voice came back, shaky. "We never found out." "What do you mean?" "We sealed it before anyone could go back." The train roared closer. 200 meters. 100. The passengers screamed. Their calm masks were gone now. Their faces twisted in rage, in hunger, in desperation. 50 meters. Noah braced himself. The train smashed through the gate. Metal exploded into the tunnel. The gate tore apart like paper as the subway blasted through it. Sparks rained across the windshield. But the crash never came. The train didn't hit a wall. The track kept going. Noah's breath caught in his throat. What? The sealed tunnel wasn't a dead end. It stretched forward into darkness, much farther than the subway system should go. Behind him, the passengers suddenly stopped screaming. They fell silent, watching the tunnel ahead. The woman whispered something softly. Not to Noah, to the others. "We're home." The train continued rolling forward. Slower now, the engine struggling. Dim lights appeared along the walls. Old ones, ancient, Not subway lights. Lanterns. Noah stared out the windshield in disbelief. The tunnel walls had changed. The concrete was gone, replaced by stone. Rough. Carved. The track wasn't new anymore either. The rails looked ancient. Rust covered everything, like the track had existed long before the city above. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio. "Noah, your train disappeared from the system." "What?" "We've lost your signal completely." The passengers began sitting down again. Calm. Quiet. Patient. Noah whispered, "Control. I think I found where they came from." The tunnel widened ahead. The track curved slowly into a massive underground chamber. Bigger than any subway station. Bigger than any underground structure Noah had ever seen. And there was a platform. Not hollow platform. Something much older. Much larger. Hundreds of figures stood there. Waiting. Noah's heart nearly stopped. The passengers inside the train began standing again. Preparing to leave. The station sign above the platform flickered dimly. Dust covered the letters. But Noah could still read them. Terminal 0. The train slowed. Noah grabbed the brake. But this time, he didn't try to stop it. The dispatcher whispered through the radio. "Noah, what do you see?" Noah's voice came out as barely more than a breath. "A city." Beyond the platform stretched endless tunnels. Tracks going in every direction. Hundreds of trains sitting silently in the darkness. Old trains. New trains. Subway cars from different decades. All parked in the underground terminal. The passengers inside Noah's train stepped off one by one, joining the crowd on the platform. Blending in. The woman in the old dress stopped at the cabin door. She looked back at Noah. Her cloudy eyes softened slightly. "You stayed too long." Then she stepped off the train and disappeared into the crowd. Noah sat frozen in the driver's seat, watching hundreds of silent passengers wandering through the underground terminal, boarding other trains, waiting, watching, learning. The dispatcher's voice crackled through the radio again. "Noah, respond." Noah swallowed. "I found them." "Found who?" Noah stared out at the massive underground station, at the endless trains, at the thousands of silent figures moving through the darkness. The missing passengers. The radio went silent. The train doors closed by themselves. Noah didn't touch the controls. The engine started again, and the train began moving deeper into the underground terminal. The train moved slowly through the massive underground terminal. Noah hadn't touched the controls, yet the subway car rolled forward as if guided by something unseen. The radio in his hand crackled faintly. "Noah, do you copy?" The dispatcher's voice sounded distant now, fading in and out through the static. Noah pressed the microphone. "I'm still here." "Your signal is weak," the dispatcher said. "Your train disappeared from every tracking system." Noah looked out through the front window. "I'm not surprised." The underground terminal stretched farther than he could see. Hundreds of subway tracks ran across the cavern-like veins. Old trains sat on many of them. Some rusted and broken. Some surprisingly modern. Some that Noah recognized from the current transit system. Others that looked decades old. Maybe even older. "This place," Noah whispered into the radio. "It's huge." "How huge?" the dispatcher asked. Noah shook his head slowly. "Bigger than Ashford Central." He watched the endless tunnels branching away from the terminal. "Actually, bigger than the entire subway system." The train rolled past another platform. Dozens of silent passengers waited there. Some wore clothing from the 1980s. Some from the 1990s. Some looked like commuters who could have vanished last week. None of them spoke. None of them acknowledged Noah. But every one of them watched the train as it passed. The dispatcher's voice crackled again. "Noah, listen carefully." "I'm listening." "There are records about something like this." Noah leaned closer to the radio. "What kind of records?" "Old transit reports. Confidential ones." The dispatcher hesitated. "They call it Terminal 0. Noah glanced up at the station sign again. The faded letters still flickered above the platform. Terminal 0. "So this place isn't new?" "No," the dispatcher said. "It's older than the subway system itself." The train slowed as it approached another platform. This one looked different. Cleaner. Brighter. Almost active. Dozens of passengers waited there. But these weren't silent like the others. They were talking, laughing, acting completely normal. Noah frowned. Control. I see people here. That's not unusual. No, Noah said slowly. These ones look alive. One man stepped onto the platform edge. He wore a modern jacket and carried a phone. He waved at the train, just like any normal commuter trying to flag down a subway. Noah whispered, "Are those real people?" The dispatcher took a long breath. "Yes." Noah's stomach dropped. "Wait, what?" "Some passengers who arrive at Terminal 0 never go back to the surface." "Why?" The dispatcher answered quietly. "They choose to stay." The train rolled past the platform slowly. The man with the phone shouted something. Noah couldn't hear it through the glass. But the man looked desperate, begging the train to stop. "Control, he looks trapped." The dispatcher sighed. "Most of them are." The train continued forward. Noah watched the platform disappear behind him. Why would anyone stay here? "Because Terminal 0 isn't just a station," the dispatcher said. "It's a network." Noah looked ahead again. The tunnel split into multiple directions. Tracks going left, right, down, even deeper underground. "How many tunnels are there?" Noah asked. "No one knows. But every few years," the dispatcher continued, "a train disappears somewhere in the city." Noah felt a chill run through him. "And they all end up here?" "Yes." The train slowed again. This time it stopped completely, right in the middle of the terminal. Noah stared at the control panel. "I didn't stop it." "I know," the dispatcher said. "Something else did." The cabin door creaked open behind him. Noah turned slowly. The subway car was empty. Every passenger from Hollow Platform had left. The seats were silent. Still. But someone was standing in the doorway. A man in a black transit uniform. Much older than the others Noah had seen earlier. The uniform looked ancient. The badge on his chest was rusted. "Driver," the man said calmly. Noah swallowed. "Who are you?" The man stepped inside the cabin. "My name doesn't matter anymore." His voice was calm. Tired. Like someone who had been waiting a very long time. "I operate Terminal 0. Noah blinked. "You operate it?" The man nodded. "Someone has too." Noah looked around the massive underground terminal again. "You mean, you run this entire place?" "Yes." The dispatcher spoke through the radio. "Noah, who are you talking to?" Noah answered quietly. "A conductor." The dispatcher went silent. The old conductor looked at the radio, then slowly closed the cabin door, cutting the signal. The static vanished. "You won't need that anymore," the conductor said. Noah stared at him. "Why?" The conductor pointed out the front window. "To the endless underground tracks. Because you stayed too long." Noah's heart sank. Those same words again. "You mean I can't go back?" The conductor shook his head slowly. "No one who reaches Terminal 0 ever does." Noah looked out at the massive underground station. At the trains. At the wandering passengers. At the tunnels disappearing into darkness. "This place, it's a second subway system." "Yes. But no one built it," the conductor said. "It grew." Noah frowned. "Grew?" Every lost train adds another track. Every missing passenger adds another platform. Noah whispered. "So this place is expanding." The conductor nodded. "Every year." Then he stepped closer to Noah and placed an old conductor's hat on the control panel. "Which means," he said quietly, "we always need new drivers." Noah stared at the hat, then slowly looked back out at the endless tunnels of Terminal 0. The train engine started again, and somewhere deep beneath the city, a new route opened. The train sat silently in the middle of Terminal 0. The engine hummed softly. Dim yellow lights stretched across the cabin, barely illuminating the endless maze of tracks and platforms. Noah stared at the old conductor's hat resting on the control panel. It looked worn, dusty, as if it had been passed between many hands over the years. Too many. The old conductor stood beside him in the cabin, watching patiently, like a man waiting for an answer he already knew. "You should put it on," he said calmly. Noah didn't move. "I'm not staying here." The conductor smiled faintly. "They all say that." Noah looked out through the windshield again. The underground terminal stretched forever. Hundreds of trains sat motionless across the tracks, each one dark, abandoned, or waiting. How many drivers are here? Noah asked. The conductor leaned against the cabin wall. More than you'd think. Give me a number. The conductor shrugged slightly. Enough to keep the trains moving. Noah turned to face him. You mean there are drivers running this place right now? Yes. Where? The conductor pointed toward the deeper tunnels branching from Terminal 0. Out there. Noah followed the direction of his finger. The tunnels curved away into darkness. Dozens of them. Hundreds maybe. Tracks disappearing into places no subway map had ever shown. What are they doing? Noah asked. The conductor answered simply. Driving. Noah frowned. Driving where? The conductor's eyes drifted toward the passengers wandering across the platforms. The silent figures. The lost commuters. The ones who had disappeared over the decades. Bringing them home, he said. Noah felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. Home. The conductor nodded. To Terminal 0. Outside the train window, a distant subway engine roared. A train appeared in one of the far tunnels. Its headlights cut through the darkness as it rolled slowly into the terminal. Noah leaned forward. Another subway train. But it looked different. The paint was older. The design outdated. A model that hadn't been used in decades. What year is that train from? Noah asked. The conductor glanced at it. 1987. Noah's chest tightened. The one that disappeared. Yes. The train rolled slowly to a stop at a nearby platform. The doors opened. Passengers stepped out. Men and women wearing clothing from the late 1980s. Confused. Disoriented. Like they had just woken up from a long sleep. Noah whispered. They are still arriving. The conductor nodded. They always are. A man stepped out of the train's driver cabin. Noah immediately recognized the uniform. Subway operator. Just like him. But the man looked exhausted. His hair was gray. His face older than it should have been. That driver vanished 39 years ago, the conductor said. He finally found his way back. Noah stared at the man. Back? Yes. To Terminal 0. The driver stumbled across the platform. Passengers surrounded him. The silent ones. The ones who had arrived years earlier. They welcomed him quietly, like someone returning home. Noah whispered. Does he know what happened? No, the conductor replied. And eventually, it won't matter. Noah looked down at the conductor's hat again. Why do you need drivers? The conductor stepped closer to the window, watching the distant tunnels. Because Terminal 0 is growing. Noah frowned. You said that before. Yes. But growth requires movement. The conductor pointed to the hundreds of trains resting across the tracks. These trains don't appear by themselves. They have to be driven here. Noah finally understood. You're saying drivers bring the trains here. The conductor nodded. Exactly. Noah's stomach sank. So every train that disappears gets driven down here. Yes. The realization made Noah feel sick. Which means he couldn't finish the sentence. The conductor did it for him. Which means every missing driver eventually becomes part of Terminal 0. Another train engine roared somewhere deeper in the tunnels. Then another. And another. Noah listened carefully. There were dozens of trains moving in the darkness. Maybe hundreds. Where are they going? He asked. The conductor's eyes glinted slightly. Back to the city. Noah blinked. What? The conductor pointed at a massive tunnel on the far side of the terminal. Unlike the others, this one had signal lights glowing inside it. Modern ones. Connected to the real subway system. That tunnel leads back to the surface, the conductor said. Noah stared at it. You mean trains leave this place? Sometimes. Noah's mind raced. Those trains go back to the city, full of passengers. The conductor nodded slowly. Yes. Noah whispered. Passengers who were lost. Yes. Passengers who have been here for years. Yes. Noah felt his heart pounding. You're sending them back. The conductor shook his head. Not exactly. Noah looked at him. What does that mean? The conductor gave a tired smile. Some passengers return. Some passengers stay. And some. He paused, looking out across the silent crowd wandering through Terminal 0. Some passengers become something else. Noah didn't like the sound of that. Something else. The conductor didn't answer. Instead, he picked up the conductor's hat from the control panel and placed it in Noah's hands. You'll understand soon. Noah stared at the hat. The fabric felt heavier than it should, like it carried years of responsibility, or years of mistakes. I'm not staying here, Noah said again. The conductor nodded. I know. Noah looked up. Then why give me this? The conductor walked toward the cabin door. Before leaving, he looked back one last time, because every driver who reaches Terminal 0 eventually says the same thing. He opened the door and stepped into the empty subway car. Then he spoke quietly, and every one of them eventually drives a train. The cabin door closed behind him. The control panel lights flickered on. The engine roared louder. The train began moving again, and the route display on the dashboard changed. Next stop, hollow platform. Noah stared at the screen in horror. Terminal 0 wasn't the end of the line. It was the beginning. The engine roared louder as the train rolled out of Terminal 0. Noah stared at the route display. The glowing letters refused to change. Next stop, hollow platform. His hands hovered over the control panel. But he didn't touch anything, because nothing on this train belonged to him anymore. The cabin lights flickered softly. Behind him, the empty subway car rattled as the train picked up speed. For the first time since leaving Ashford Central, no passengers stood inside the car. No pale faces. No silent watchers. Just rows of empty seats stretching into the darkness. But Noah knew that wouldn't last. He could already hear something far behind him in the tunnels. Other trains. Engines echoing through the underground network. Moving through Terminal 0. Returning to the city. Or bringing more passengers down. The radio crackled suddenly. A weak signal forced its way through the static. Noah, if you can hear me, respond. The dispatcher, still trying to reach him. Noah grabbed the microphone. I'm here. Relief burst through the radio. Oh, thank God. You disappeared from the system. The dispatcher continued. All your signals vanished. Noah stared out at the dark tunnel rushing toward him. I found the place where missing trains go. The dispatcher's voice went quiet. You mean hollow platform? No. Noah swallowed. Something bigger. He described what he had seen. The endless underground terminal. The hundreds of trains. The lost passengers wandering the platforms. The conductor who ran everything. The dispatcher listened in silence. When Noah finished, the man finally spoke. I was afraid of that. You knew? Noah asked. Not exactly, the dispatcher replied. But there were rumors. Noah tightened his grip on the microphone. What kind of rumors? That hollow platform wasn't the destination. The dispatcher paused. It was a doorway. The train sped through another long tunnel. Lights flickered along the walls. The route display beeped softly. Next stop, hollow platform. Noah whispered. I'm heading there again. The dispatcher inhaled sharply. That's bad. Why? Because trains that leave Terminal 0 usually bring something back. Noah frowned. What do you mean something? The dispatcher answered slowly. Passengers. The train began slowing. The rails screeched softly. Ahead, the familiar dim lights of hollow platform flickered into view. The same broken station sign. The same cracked tiles. The same dusty air. But something was different this time. The platform wasn't empty. Dozens of people stood waiting. Real people. Not the silent figures from before. Noah leaned closer to the window. They looked normal. Commuters. Students. Office workers. Even a few teenagers with backpacks. What the hell? Noah whispered. The dispatcher heard him. What do you see? People. How many? 30, maybe 40. The dispatcher's voice turned cold. They're not supposed to be there. The train slowed to a stop. The doors opened. The commuters stepped inside, laughing, talking, complaining about late trains, completely unaware of where they were. A man in a business suit walked past the cabin window. He glanced inside and gave Noah a polite nod. Just another normal subway ride. Noah grabbed the intercom. Attention passengers. This train is not part of the regular route. A few people looked around, confused. What's he talking about? Is this the downtown line? The dispatcher spoke urgently through the radio. Noah, listen carefully. I'm listening. Those people didn't come from the city. Noah's stomach tightened. What? They were taken. The train doors slid shut. The engine started moving again. The commuters grabbed the handrails as the subway accelerated into the tunnel. Still chatting. Still confused. Still completely unaware of where they were going. Control, Noah whispered. You're saying they were kidnapped? Yes. By what? The dispatcher hesitated. By the trains. Noah stared into the mirror above the dashboard. The passengers filled the subway car. Talking. Scrolling on their phones. Arguing quietly. Living normal lives. But something else was happening. Slowly. Quietly. One by one. They stopped talking. The first sign was subtle. A woman stopped typing on her phone. Her fingers froze mid-message. Then a man lowered his newspaper. His eyes stared straight ahead. Another passenger stopped, whispering to her friend. Her mouth stayed half open. Silent. Noah felt cold dread spreading through his chest. Control. The dispatcher's voice came back immediately. What's happening? They're going quiet. The mirror showed the entire car falling still. Phones lowered. Books closed. Voices fading. 30 passengers. Now silent. Then they all turned toward the cabin at the same time. Their eyes locked onto Noah. The dispatcher whispered, "Oh no." The passengers stood up slowly, their movements calm, controlled, almost synchronized. Noah's voice trembled. They are not confused anymore. The dispatcher didn't answer, because he already knew what was happening. The passengers began walking toward the driver's cabin. Slow, silent. One of them reached the cabin door. A young man wearing a college jacket. He raised his hand and knocked. 3 slow taps. Noah closed his eyes. They're learning again. The dispatcher whispered through the radio. Noah, they're not just learning. The young man knocked again. 3 more taps. The dispatcher finished the sentence. They are becoming passengers of Terminal 0. The knocking continued. 3 slow taps. Then silence. 3 more taps. Noah stared at the cabin door as the sound echoed through the train. Behind that door stood 30 passengers who had boarded at Hollow Platform only minutes ago. People who had looked normal. People who had talked and laughed and checked their phones. Now they were silent. Watching him. Waiting. Learning. Noah. The dispatcher's voice crackled weakly through the radio. You still there? I'm here, Noah whispered. Tell me what's happening. Noah glanced at the mirror above the control panel. The passengers stood in the aisle again. All facing the cabin. All waiting for the door to open. They've stopped acting human. The dispatcher exhaled slowly. That's how it begins. The young man outside the cabin knocked again. 3 taps. Exactly the same rhythm as the others before him. Exactly the same rhythm as the passengers from Hollow Platform. Noah asked the question he had been avoiding. What happens when they reach Terminal 0? The dispatcher hesitated. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded grim. They joined the others. Forever? Yes. The train sped deeper through the tunnel. The lights flashed past the windows like streaks of lightning. The route display flickered again. Next stop, Terminal 0. Noah stared at the glowing letters. This train is taking them down there. Yes. That means they are already lost. The dispatcher didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. Behind Noah, the passengers began whispering again. Soft voices filling the subway car. The same phrase repeated over and over. You stayed too long. You stayed too long. You stayed too long. The cabin door rattled violently. Another hinge snapped. It wouldn't last much longer. Noah, the dispatcher said suddenly. You need to listen carefully. I am. There might be one way to stop this. Noah tightened his grip on the microphone. What way? The dispatcher hesitated, because the answer sounded impossible. You have to break the route. Noah frowned. What does that mean? Terminal 0 controls the trains through their routes. The dispatcher continued quickly. If the route ends, the system loses control. Noah glanced at the control panel. But the train chooses the route. Yes. So how do I break it? The dispatcher's voice dropped to a whisper. You end the line. Noah felt his stomach drop. You mean crash the train again? No. Something worse. The dispatcher paused before finishing. You destroy the track. The cabin door burst open. Metal tore apart as the passengers pushed through. The young man stepped into the cabin first. His eyes cloudy. His smile empty. Driver, he said calmly. Take us home. Noah ignored him. Control, there's no way to destroy subway tracks from inside a train. There is, the dispatcher replied. Emergency derail. Noah froze. That system was only used in catastrophic failures. If activated at full speed, the train would jump the rails completely. You're asking me to kill everyone on this train. The dispatcher's voice cracked. If you don't, Terminal 0 keeps growing. The passengers surrounded Noah now, standing inches away, watching him carefully, studying his every movement. You stayed too long, they whispered together. The train burst out of the tunnel into another underground station. But this one wasn't hollow platform. It wasn't Terminal 0 either. The station sign flashed past the window. Ashford Central. Noah's breath caught. The train had returned to the city. Hundreds of commuters stood on the platform, waiting, unaware of the danger. If the doors opened, 30 passengers from Terminal 0 would walk into the crowd, and no one would know the difference. The train began slowing automatically. The doors prepared to open. Behind Noah, the passengers smiled. The young man spoke again. Open the doors. Noah looked at the emergency derail lever. Red. Heavy. Final. The dispatcher whispered through the radio. Noah, it's your choice. The train slowed further. The platform drew closer. Commuters stepped forward, waiting for the doors. Noah closed his eyes. Then he pulled the lever. The train exploded off the rails. Metal screamed as the subway car tore sideways across the tracks. The front of the train slammed into a concrete barrier. Glass shattered. Steel twisted. The entire train flipped onto its side. The station filled with smoke and dust. People screamed and ran for safety. Emergency alarms blared through the underground tunnels. And then everything went silent. Hours later, rescue crews searched the wreckage. Firefighters cut through twisted metal. Police officers secured the station. Inside the crushed subway car, they found only one body. The driver, Noah Carter. The passenger section of the train was empty. Every seat vacant. Every door sealed. No passengers. The official report called it a mechanical failure. A tragic accident. A heroic attempt by the driver to stop the train before it reached the station. But far beneath the city, deep in the endless tunnels of Terminal 0, another train rolled slowly into the underground terminal. Its doors opened. 30 passengers stepped onto the platform, silent, patient, waiting, and at the front of the train, a new driver sat in the cabin, wearing an old conductor's hat. His eyes stared forward, cloudy, empty, and the route display above the dashboard flickered. Next stop, hollow platform.